So again, today's talk is, I think it's the fifth in this series on Jhana. There's going to be this, and I think at least three more, and then I'll conclude this series with the Jhana Sutta, where the Buddha describes his search for understanding in terms of ignoble and noble searches, which describes why he taught the meditation method that he taught, and for deepening concentration and for really no other reason. And I'm going to read the introduction to the article too. If you read this article before around midnight last night, there's some changes to it. So. It's just a little bit more background on these non-physical fabricated mind states. From the introduction, Jhana means meditative absorption. The Buddha teaches in a general way 4 levels of meditative absorption or deepening concentration. As can be seen here, these 4 levels are not in a practical sense strictly defined. The development of concentration can and should be mindfully observed as concentration increases. The 4 levels of jhana are impermanent and are developed from engaging in Shamatha-Vipassana meditation as taught by the Buddha, and so should not be viewed as meditative achievement. Shamatha-Vipassana meditation is not another opportunity for fabricating experience through continued confusion or desire that is encouraged by misguided instruction. Free of grasping after, these levels of meditative absorption are simply recognized that Shamatha-Vipassana meditation is actually developing concentration while avoiding creating further distraction. So really what the Buddha is teaching in the jhanas is not instruction for meditation, but what to be looking for. And why would he do that? Because he recognized that if we don't have a focus in meditation, a mind prone to ignoring its own ignorance will grasp after anything and create fabricated states within a meditation practice. It seemed like some level of achievement. And he noticed this because he went through it himself. Very prominent teachers during his lifetime taught meditation practices like that. And these are still the predominant meditation practices today. Primarily continue eye-making by establishing self-reference in an object, event, viewer idea. And that'll become...
Can I ask a question, John?
Please.
So the Buddha taught the jhanas so that people can be aware that those are states that occur, but they shouldn't cling to them?
Exactly. Yes. And the other part of that is as you recognize these different levels of meditative absorption, the jhanas, it's showing you that your meditation practice is correct. In other words, you are deepening concentration. And there's nothing magical or mystical or even ambiguous about these different levels, as you'll see. They're just simply what occurs, but it's important to be mindful of it. Nearly as much as, let me put it a different way, the Buddha taught that it's important to recognize what is present in our minds, what's occurring in our lives, but equally as important to recognize in the moment what is no longer present. And ultimately what that means is to recognize that ignorance is no longer present, that we have emptied ourselves of ignorance. In order to do that, it takes a mindful focus. And the Buddha taught an 8-fold path to provide that focus, not just meditation. Great question.
It's interesting because I realized that a lot of the times I've heard you talk about the jhanas, I still, in an almost unconscious way, want to get to a certain state.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons why these fabricated non-physical states came into favor even during the Buddha's time, and again continuing to this day, because as we start to deepening our concentration, we're taking our minds away from continuing to establish a self-referential self, continuing self-identity. So a mind that wants to continue its own ignorance will create states to establish itself in and say, this is what meditation is all about. And again, centuries, thousands of years long practices are rooted in just that. And again, the Buddha didn't teach jhanas just in one sutta, as this series shows. He came back to it again and again to reinforce this is what meditation is for, and it's not for anything else. Because anything else, it's taken me a while to be comfortable in saying that, but anything else is just forms of I-making, forms of conceit. And in that way, they're just distractions. They might seem reasonable. And I'll touch on more of that here as we go along, but it's so important. And again, the reason why I'm teaching this now is the timing with our last retreat, but also that our Sangha, despite this, it's not well attended today, but our Sangha overall is ready to see this. Excuse me. Let me go back one. Free of grasping after these levels of meditative absorption are simply recognize that Shamatha-Vipassana meditation is actually developing concentration while avoiding creating further distraction. This aspect of right view then remains free of conceit or I-making that would otherwise create frustration and distraction within a Shamatha-Vipassana meditation practice. So it's not, many people come to, especially a well-focused meditation practice like the Buddha taught, and they very quickly become bored and stop for quite a few reasons. One is they don't realize that it's part of an eightfold path. But if they're looking at meditation as a way to fix a broken self or add something or achieve something, they're going to become very frustrated very quickly, because that's not what it's about. It's about just deepening your concentration. And I emphasize that all the time. The purpose, the reason why we meditate is to deepen concentration, to support the refined mindfulness that can integrate the entire Eightfold Path. But it's very hard for a mind that's prone to distraction to even hear those simple words. Again, this was common during the Buddha's time. And the reason why he kept coming back to it, because he recognized it even within his own Sangha. And well, let me continue. The sequencing, excuse me, the sequencing of the additional descriptions of non-physical meditative experience that follows the descriptions of 4 levels of jhana should also not be seen as advanced levels as is commonly presented, and certainly not as levels of meditative achievement. These fabricated non-physical meditation experiences were part of the doctrines of Siddhartha Gautama's early teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. I'll get more into this in a few weeks when I teach the Arya Pariyasana Sutta. Having mastered them, he immediately dismissed them as, in quotes, they do not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, or to unbinding from views ignorant of Four Noble Truths. The Buddha continues, this Dhamma, or this meditation method, only seeks to establish a reappearance in the dimension of nothingness. That was Alara Kalama's teachings. Or Uddaka Ramaputta taught to establish yourself in the dimension of neither perception nor non-perception. Hard to figure what that is, but or other common teachings during the Buddha's time and in today, such as establishing yourself in infinite space or infinite consciousness, or any other fabricated non-physical self-reference. And that's all that they are. They're creating imaginary states to establish yourself in, which completely contradicts what the Buddha is teaching. The ultimate resting place for the Buddha's Dhamma is a mind united in its body. So anytime we're establishing ourselves in imagined non-physical realms, we're out of our body, aren't we? That's the major problem in stress and suffering. This is a realization Siddhartha developed prior to his awakening. The reason why that's important is that these non-physical establishments are often taught in the context of jhana after the Buddha teaches the 4 levels of jhana. And so that could be misinterpreted as these are higher levels of concentration, when it's just a sequencing. The Buddha could just as easily start, and I'll mention it here, he could have simply started a talk on jhana saying, first thing you should do is don't go to these non-physical places and then give the teachings. But he understood that it's almost like when you tell somebody, don't look at the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz. You're going to be looking at the man behind the curtain, aren't you? So he understood that, and that's a pretty profound understanding. And so he didn't just say, don't do it. He explained why in these teachings. And almost every teaching on jhana also includes the caution against establishing yourself in these non-physical realms. This is a realization that Siddhartha developed prior to his awakening. As such, it could have been taught to simply avoid any fabricated non-physical self-reference. One of the breakthroughs of understanding Siddhartha had was the powerful but very subtle strategies that a mind rooted in ignorance will develop and cling to in order to continue ignorance. With profound wisdom, the Buddha realized the attraction of continuing self-establishment in fabricated non-physical realms. He understood that the most effective method of understanding the foolishness of these doctrines that encourage continued eye-making would be to explain these common experiences in the context of Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. In other words, he incorporated what to avoid within the practice itself, rather than just treating it as something to avoid, which I think is brilliant. And a lot of other people do. In these ways, these non-physical fabrications were seen in the proper context as simply ordinary fabrications to be recognized and abandoned. The Buddha typically told his followers to go find the root of a tree or an empty hut and do jhana. This is instructions on establishing seclusion as the primary environment for Shamatha-Vipassana meditation, leading to the development of ever-deepening levels of meditative absorption. The singular meditation method the Buddha taught for deepening concentration is through Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. The Shamatha-Vipassana meditation method is established in the Satipatthana Sutta, the primary sutta on 4 foundations of mindfulness. It is the initial section of the Satipatthana Sutta that is instruction for calming the mind by becoming mindful of the breath in the body. This is the first foundation of mindfulness that begins the process of jhana, of developing concentration. The second and third foundations of mindfulness continues the establishment of concentration. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I got when I
started off real good and it got.
Yeah, when I got a lot I want to cover. Thank you.
It's enthusiasm.
I know
Yeah.
it is. I hate to call your enthusiasm, but
No, you're right. Nobody can
coming
follow
at
this.
me too fast and I can't take it in.
I told you I was conditioned by Evelyn Woods. Nobody knows what that is. Evelyn Woods was a speed reader. Yeah.
I remember
that. It is the initial section of the Satipatthana Sutta that is instructions for calming the mind by becoming mindful of the breath in the body. This is the first foundation of mindfulness that begins the process of jhana, of developing concentration. The second and third foundations of mindfulness continues the establishment of concentration by ending distractions arising from reacting to or clinging to feelings and thoughts as they arise and pass away, always returning mindfulness to the breath. This instruction relates directly to the levels of jhana. Avoiding the distraction that would arise by reacting to feelings and thoughts, the joy of seclusion and of deepening concentration is recognized. As concentration increases, directed thought and evaluation is abandoned, and a pleasant abiding is established, which relates to the fourth foundation of mindfulness, being at peace with the present quality of mind. And that'll become apparent. The Buddha's Dhamma reunites the mind and the body and overcomes the self-identification seeking to establish a self in fabricated magical, mystical, and imaginary planes of physical non-existence. As with all of the Buddha's teachings, this sutta must be seen within the overarching context of dependent origination and Four Noble Truths to be useful and practically applicable. When seen in the overarching context of the Dhamma and in the context of engaging in Shamatha-Vipassana meditation solely for deepening concentration, grasping after self-establishment in imaginary and fabricated mind states is seen clearly as intentional distraction used to continue to ignore ignorance of Four Noble Truths. As concentration increases, refined mindfulness is established, supporting integration of the Eightfold Path, developing profound understanding of 3 marks of existence. This sutta is similar to the Samadanga Sutta that we taught and discussed last week, last Saturday and Tuesday, I think, and the remarkable scope of the underlying Dhamma that's referenced. And just to explain a few words that I use, rapture is a word often used in the Dhamma to describe a profoundly joyful engagement with the Dhamma. Directed thought has right intention as its motivating factor to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. And there's more to it than that I won't get into. Evaluation here refers to the value placed on an experience as being either pleasure or painful. The Jhana Sutta. On one occasion, the Buddha addressed those gathered. I tell you, friends, that the ending of the defilements of greed, aversion, and deluded thinking, rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, depends on fully developing the four levels of jhana and overcoming the desire for establishment in the dimension of the infinite, of the dimension of the infinitude of space, the dimension of infinitude of consciousness, the dimension of nothingness, or the dimension of perception, nor non-perception. So immediately in this sutta, the Buddha is addressing and instructing to be mindful of these and don't go there. Don't establish yourself. There's no teaching that the Buddha gave to first do this. In other words, to establish yourself in the dimension of nothingness and then realize that it's just a distraction. He teaches that it's just a distraction. Friends, the ending of the defilements depends on the first jhana. The first jhana is secluded from sensuality and other unskillful mental qualities. One enters and remains in the first jhana. This first jhana is experienced as rapture born of that very seclusion. It is accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. So we all do this in meditation. We first become mindful of the breath in the body. We've established seclusion by withdrawing ourselves from the world. Hopefully it's in a quiet place. And we become mindful of the breath in the body. If we're mindful of what we're doing, there's joy in just recognizing that I found seclusion. I found a peaceful state. Excuse me. And while there is still directed thought and evaluation, you're still mindful of the instructions on what to meditate. You're mindful of recognizing thoughts arising and passing away and coming back to your thought. And you might still be evaluating feelings and thoughts as pleasant or painful or neither pleasant nor painful. But it's that initial state of being mindful of the breath in the body that establishes seclusion as the first experience in meditation, the first experience of deepening concentration. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. So the reason why I'm emphasizing it is there's nothing extraordinary about that. It's simply engaging in meditation as the Buddha taught meditation. There's nothing to grasp after. Furthermore, the ending of the defilements depends on the second jhana, which is the stilling of directed thought and evaluation. This second jhana is experienced as rapture and pleasure born of concentration. Free of directed thought and evaluation, the joy of concentration permeates their entire mind and body. So again, we're continuing our meditation practice and our concentration is deepening. Even if it's just for a moment, we're mindful of our breath and we're not thinking about it. And you've mentioned this a few times. And we're not evaluating the experience. And for most of us, we'll go right back into directed thought. In other words, the reason why I say that these aren't strictly defined levels is in each and every meditation session, we're kind of bouncing back and forth between levels. But as we continue our meditation practice in a general way, our concentration is deepening. Is that clear? I'm skipping over some of my comments here. You know what? This is important. I'm going to read it. The second jhana is a deepening awareness of the mind calming in the body as a point of concentration. In other words, the mind is starting to become united in the body. And that develops a mind united in its body is a calm and well-concentrated mind. For some, just beginning Shamatha-Vipassana meditation, this can be difficult. Many popular meditation methods have developed from the desire to avoid uniting one's mind in their body. Common meditation practices such as analytical contemplation, deity, or other intricate visualizations, overemphasis on and manipulation of the breath incorporating physical movements such as repetitive bowing or exaggerated postures, chanting, or substituting sensory stimuli such as using incense or music, and seeking to establish the self in imaginary non-physical realms are all common meditation strategies that can only continue distraction and continue ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So I've just dismissed just about every other meditation practice there is out there.
I was just noticing that.
But I do it just like the Buddha did. I tried each and every one of those, and I found them all to be simply more distraction. Some were more pleasant than others. Some seemed more purposeful than others. I took my vows in a Tibetan tradition that basically teaches that you must do 108,000 full prostrations before your Dhamma practice truly begins. I didn't find any of that useful. Furthermore, the ending of the Buddha continues. Furthermore, the ending of the defilements depends on the third jhana, which is the fading of rapture. They remain equanimous, mindful, alert, and sensitive to pleasure. That's an important line. Our minds has the third jhana is simply that a deeper level of concentration. Equanimity or equanimous means that our mind is just balanced. There's nothing in that present moment to provoke any type of disturbance. And sensitive to pleasure doesn't mean that we are grasping after pleasure. We're just mindful of the pleasant abiding, and that leads to what the Buddha says now. With the fading of rapture, this pleasant abiding permeates the entire mind and body. So we're sensitive to the pleasure of a well-concentrated mind. And that pleasure permeates our entire being. And if you look at this as the Buddha is describing it, it's not something that we're grasping after. It's not an objectified achievement. It's simply pleasure of a mind well concentrated, united in its body. You could say it's the pleasure of finally coming home, a pleasant abiding. And so again, each and every one of us has experienced this, even if it's just briefly in our meditation practice, correct? Not something extraordinary. These are ordinary states of ever deepening levels of concentration. My comments. This third jhana is characterized by the stilling of directed thought and evaluation, and now able to experience the subtle pleasure of a mind calmly united with the body. This is a pleasant abiding free of comparison to what is no longer present. So think about that. Most of our lives, especially when we don't have a practice to calm our minds, I think just about every one of us has talked about being stuck in this monkey mind and how do I calm it? The mind's always churning. Well, your mind is always churning because you're always seeking self-reference. It's always an objectified search to find some place to establish a self in. And when we finally come to a meditation practice that's realistic and actually develops concentration, that can be off-putting until we realize, and again, the importance of this instruction is to recognize this is what we're to experience. A lack of anything within us to provoke us outside of ourselves. We take great pleasure in finally being in this pleasant abiding of simply being who we are, without the need for anything in this moment to be any different than it is. Now, that experience on our meditation cushion, once it's recognized, is something that we can now take off our cushion and expand it into our mundane life. But if we don't recognize it on our cushion, we won't recognize it off our cushion. We won't recognize that
what the Buddha saw when he was observing his Sangha, that they may appear or speak about what they were experiencing during their meditation, but off their cushion, he was observing different behaviors that would show that they weren't doing right meditation.
Yes, there's that, and some of these suttas on jhana were direct. I think Tuesday's class will be a direct response to somebody's question, and then he gets into the. But yeah, a lot of the Buddha suttas, most of them, are from recognizing what's going on with the Sangha, hearing what people are talking about, and then responding to what's occurring, but also to the common spiritual, I hesitate using that word, but the general spiritual community of the Buddha's time, which was all rooted in these types of practices, much like today. So again, the Buddha spent nearly as much time teaching what it isn't and what to avoid as he taught what to incorporate as Dhamma practice. The Buddha continues. Furthermore, the ending of the defilements depends on the fourth jhana, which is the abandoning of evaluation. So think about what that would be like in your life, and you've all done it in meditation, to just have a moment in your life where you're not thinking, I like this, I don't like that, this is good, this is bad, I want this, I don't want that. And again, our meditation practice, that's a sign of a distracted mind, isn't it? Always evaluating things in terms of self-reference. What's it doing to me? Pardon me?
Comparing things.
Yeah.
Compare it to everything.
That's the essence of a distracted mind. And so the reason why the Buddha taught meditation for deepening concentration is it's the antidote to that way of thinking. It's a direct antidote. It calms the mind. It stops the mind from seeking distraction. And so the abandoning of that evaluation is the establishment of the fourth jhana, which we've all experienced. The Buddha continues, they enter and remain in the fourth jhana, which is pure equanimity, meaning there's nothing left from the inference is that in the third jhana, there's still likely some provocation within us towards distraction. The fourth jhana is simply a deeper level of those first three that now is pure. Pure equanimity and mindful. Being pure, neither pleasure nor pain is seen. They sit permeated in mind and body with pure, bright awareness. The fourth jhana is a pleasant abiding. Again, nothing extraordinary, is it? Until you compare it to the way our minds were before we took up a useful meditation practice, then it is quite extraordinary. To have a simple and direct technique that when engaged with as taught, very quickly develops this peaceful abiding. Remarkable. My comment here, the fourth jhana is simply a deepening level of concentration and resulting in pleasant abiding that remains at peace no matter what arises. This pleasant abiding is a defining characteristic of a well-concentrated mind having integrated the Eightfold Path. That also relates to the fourth foundation of mindfulness, to be mindful of the present quality of our minds. And what I often say is we learn to be at peace with less than peaceful mind states. That's all part of this pleasant abiding. So we could be in a situation where we are able to not lose our minds because of a well-concentrated mind, and the situation might be chaotic, but we are at peace with that less than peaceful state that we're living in. And that's possible and likely for anyone that develops the Eightfold Path as the Buddha teaches. The Buddha continues, this follower of the noble Eightfold Path understands that any phenomena connected to five clinging aggregates, form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness, is impermanent, stressful, a disease, painful, an affliction, and as such, anatta. Remember from the Anatta-Lakkhana Sutta, if it's impermanent or prone to any of these things, how could it be a self? And the five clinging aggregates simply describe the ongoing personal experience of suffering rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. When wisdom now supplants that ignorance, the five clinging aggregates are no longer in play. They no longer affect us. The Buddha continues, this follower of the Noble Eightfold Path disregards those phenomena and inclines their mind to the cessation of ignorance. Nothing remains to provoke the birth of suffering. The true meaning of karma and rebirth is not what future birth we might have, but what am I holding in my mind that will frame what I give birth to in the next moment. And if there's nothing left of ignorance, then I cannot give birth to another moment rooted in ignorance. My comment, a well-concentrated mind no longer has self-referential thoughts and views objectified and focused on outside the body, on people, events, or fabricated ideas. The Buddha continues, this follower of the Noble Eightfold Path, from fully developing the four levels of jhana, knows an exquisite peace, Fabrications ended, grasping too. Dispassion and unbinding are established. It is as if an archer or their apprentice were to practice on a particular target. With continued practice, they would be able to shoot quickly for long distances, piercing many targets. In the same manner, they reach the cessation of defilements, if not then through continued joyful effort and cessation of the 5 lower fetters and these are the 5 lower fetters of self-identification, grasping at rituals and practices, doubt and uncertainty, sensual craving, and deluded thinking. Each one of these I've seen them incorporated as part of what is called the Buddhist practice. And the Buddha calls them 5 lower fetters. I won't get into all that, but if you look at it, you can see it. The Buddha continues, they are released, meaning unbound from wrong views, ignorant of 4 noble truths. I tell you, friends, that the ending of the defilements of greed, aversion, and deluded thinking depends on fully developing the 4 levels of jhana and overcoming the desire for establishment in the dimension of the infinitude of space, the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, the dimension of nothingness, or the dimension of perception nor non-perception. This follower of the Noble Eightfold Path, and that could, I try to maintain fidelity to the suttas, and so that's why I include that long list, but I could have just as easily have said any establishment in a non-physical realm is to be recognized as just distraction. The Buddha continues, this follower of the Noble Eightfold Path, having abandoned self-identification with form, having abandoned aversion, having abandoned self-reference now here and now there, they enter and remain in the perception of the infinitude of space. Even here, now this is where the Buddha is describing how you might find yourself established here. And then he says, even here, they understand any phenomena connected to the 5 clinging aggregates, form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness, is impermanent, stressful, a disease, painful, and affliction, and as such, anatta, not self. So in the context of the sutta, the Buddha is saying, even if you aspire to establish yourself in these different planes, recognize they're all part of distraction. They're all part of something rooted in ignorance. And they're always prone to suffering because there's an aspect of the 5 clinging aggregates in them. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. They disregard these phenomena and incline their mind to the cessation of ignorance. Again, repeating, nothing remains to provoke the birth of suffering. The Buddha here is reminding those in the original Sangha and now modern Dhamma practitioners to avoid the pain of continued ignorance and cease attempting to establish the self in imaginary non-physical realms and return mindfulness to the breath united with the body. If looked at closely and with right view, aspiring to non-physical realms is clearly an attempt at compulsively maintaining that which the Buddha teaches is prone to greed, aversion, and ongoing delusion, the 5 clinging aggregates. The magical, mystical, and imaginary non-physical realms mentioned here refer to the unskillful attempt to establish a permanent self in any realm, whether past, present, or future. These were common themes during the Buddha's time and continue today in much of modern Buddhism. This also includes the common focus of modern meditation to uncover or realize a hidden or suppressed inner Buddha nature. The purpose of concentration is to unite the mind and the body moment by moment, free of any self-referential views. The Buddha continues, this follower of the Noble Eightfold Path, from fully developing the 4 levels of jhana, knows an exquisite peace, fabrications ended, grasping to, dispassion and unbinding established. Friends, now it leads into another section on that. Friends, the cessation of the defilements depends on recognizing and abandoning the 5 clinging aggregates, the 5 fetters, overcoming the desire for establishment in the dimension of the infinitude of space, the dimension of the infinitude of consciousness, the dimension of nothingness, or the dimension of perception or non-perception. Thus, this is a profound understanding, unsurpassed and overcoming the 5 clinging aggregates. Those followers of the Noble Eightfold Path who have attained this understanding and emerge from dependence on ignorance, skillful meditators all, will rightly explain this to others. What that last line. Once we understand it, we'll rightly explain this to others. It's the end of the sutta. I hope I rightly explained it to you.
Yeah.
Did I?
Yes.
What a powerful sutta. Again, very similar to the other talks on jhana, but getting very, very specific about these non-physical realms in this sutta. And this one happens to be called the Jhana Sutta. Any questions related to? Well, there's only three of us. Let's go around the room. We'll start with Lorna. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Oh, it's just great to be here, John. It really is.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank goodness for the Buddha. Thank goodness for you too. Yes, I've seen more clearly through this sutta the connection that we have with anatta. That we've got to break that connection.
Yeah.
And how we get connected is always the five clinging aggregates and kind of the whole heart of the Buddha's teaching
It is.
is
Yeah.
in this sutta.
Yeah.
It's really compact. And again, I've listened to it, and again, I'll take a little bit more from it and take to my cushion and just keep on the good work, which is all I can do at this point. But if I said, the absence of anatta, when you have those moments of absence of anatta and you are not distracted, and I know this is sort of questioning the whole faith, the whole practice really. I don't get a lot of euphoria out of that. I mean, it's just bland. It's when I recognise that I'm not grasping. It's not a happy place. It doesn't strike me that way.
Yeah.
And yet that's the goal of it. So then I question the whole practice. I question the whole practice of seeking. What am I doing? Seeking the absence of anatta when it doesn't make me happy in the moment anyway. And but yet the Buddha speaks of this so differently than my perception of that. What I think is when I'm very concentrated. He speaks of it very differently than how it appears to me. And that I don't get, because I hang on every word of the Buddha in a million other ways. But when we get to the heart of the matter, his experience of it is different to mine.
So, boy, the whole topic that you're bringing up is so important. It takes a while for a mind that is prone towards distraction to recognize what true peace really is. And so, while it seems bland, I think you would agree that it's also a peaceful abiding, isn't it?
It's
And
peaceful.
not to interrupt you. And so a self-referential ego personality always wants more. So having a technique to go from a distracted mind, sometimes troubled, to being able to directly, through your own efforts, establish a peaceful abiding is truly remarkable. But there's no distraction there. And that's what takes a while to get used to. And that's what you're integrating. But you also, I know you, because we've talked about it, and you bring it up in class, off your cushion, you've experienced great benefits and a much calmer and peaceful mind. I mean, again, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I think what I'm looking for also, that when I get there, I'm looking for comfort. I'm looking to be possibly to be more comfortable with life or something like that. And it doesn't come across that way. It's not I think, that I think that I'm looking for to make me more comfortable.
Yes. So,
and it doesn't make you more comfortable.
Well, ultimately
in
it does, but that has to do with right view also. and being at peace. What the first noble truth is, dukkha occurs as a consequence of having a human life. There's going to be the Buddha's description of dukkha, of suffering. That continues. The world continues. The conditions of the world continues post-awakening. Remember the Loka Sutta, where the Buddha, this is after his awakening, looks out in the world, said the world is a flame. Well, so even as we deepen our concentration and integrate at ever deeper levels the entire Eightfold Path and start becoming awakened, the environment that we're living in is still a flame. And until we're fully there, until we're fully awakened, and you're about 5 yards away, you're close. There's still those aspects of disappointment. But look at the difference now from not even understanding disappointment to understanding that I'm disappointed because I want something to be different than it is, including this peaceful abiding that I discovered inside me. You know, and that's really the difference. But there is, I would say, it takes a while to get get used to the blandness of not grasping after things anymore. You know, it's so ingrained in us that, like, it started that remember the series on restraint that we went through a couple months ago, and I started with that saying that that misguided state that life is a banquet, you should never leave the table hungry or something like that. That's the grasping mentality that we're supposed to get as much as we can out of life, and that's the problem, because when a mind is always going in that direction, we're always prone to disappointment. And so it takes a while for that to subside, even during a meditation practice. But you described that process beautifully. So thank you. Did that help your understanding?
Terrific.
Pardon me?
It's been terrific. Been a great morning.
It is. Anthony, good to see you this morning.
Good morning. I was thinking about, like, my distractions aren't I don't think that I do a lot of the comparing mind, but my distractions tend to be either thoughts about things I can do in my cases that pop up,
Yeah.
or some sense of insecurity or fear I have about myself as a person. Those are the two things that come up the most for me. Maybe occasionally a comparing mind, but that's not a recurring thing for me. And then about the jhanas, I was spending a lot of time during this talk trying to think about if my approach is healthy, because I do feel when I get into a deep jhana that it's very satisfying and I like it. I was trying to think, do I crave it? And I think I'm pretty open most of the time to whatever my experience is when I sit down on the cushion. There may have been a couple of times I've sat down with a goal of hitting a jhana, but I don't think that's too overriding. And then I was really relieved when you said that you can notice the pleasure of it, because I thought, well, should I even be noticing the pleasure of it?
Sensitive to pleasure. Yeah.
But even if I were able to sustain, I mean, that's the thing, is you can't really sustain the pleasure. So it's not like I could sit there and just keep doing that jhana, you know, like you could keep drinking alcohol to go into a pleasurable state. You can't really sustain that. So, and I don't really just keep dropping into meditation all day to hit a jhana.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's healthy. But how do you know the borderline between whether you want to crave a jhana or whether you're just going to appreciate it? What I kind of grapple with.
Well, that's where the evaluation comes in too. That am I seeing this as achievement, or something that I want to achieve, or am I simply engaging in the process of being mindful of the breath in the body and letting it develop? And again, it's very subtle. And so when you're caught into thinking, are you there? That's the evaluation. And so that's not right or wrong. In fact, when you're there, that's the second jhana, isn't it? And what do? What did the Buddha say to go from the second jhana to the third jhana? Be mindful of your breath. Yeah, keep meditating. It didn't say, there's no step-by-step instruction. And notice there's nothing where the Buddha is saying you're doing something wrong in the first jhana. He's just simply describing an ordinary meditation practice. But what you described about yourself, sometimes you're thinking about what might be coming up in your law practice, or something about how you're feeling. That there's a subtle aspect of evaluation there too. And again, it's not right or wrong. In that you recognize it and continue your meditation practice is the most important thing. In fact, what I would say is you're doing it exactly as it's taught. Only the individual meditator knows how much they're getting caught up in their thoughts and directed thoughts and evaluation. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is it's impossible to describe, and this kind of goes to what David brought up, why the Buddha taught this in different ways, because it would be even impossible to describe to a fully awakened Buddha, because it's too objective, isn't it? But so the Buddha's response was meditate and notice these deepening levels of meditative absorption, because then you're doing it right. That's all. That maybe to simplify all of this, well, I'm giving 9 talks on something I could simplify in a sentence, is simply to recognize that your meditation practice is correct. You're doing it for the right purpose to deepen concentration. How do you know? Because you're noticing your ever deepening concentration.
It's very hard though not to look back and say, oh, this was a good meditation because I hit the jhanas twice. It's pretty hard not to do that. Yep.
And you know what you do when you do it? Go into the next thought. It doesn't really. Oh, I understand what you're saying.
Because I go, well, that was a good meditation because I hit the jhanas twice or 3 times. Where if I go in and I just constantly find myself breaking a thought chain and going back and not getting deeper, you do tend to think it wasn't as good. But if success were a measure, I would have quit a long time ago, because I don't normally have great meditations. They run the gamut. They go like from here to there and everything in between.
Oh yeah, especially when we're looking for something spectacular rather than just a peaceful abiding. Again, it's a fine line, Anthony, that in fact the Buddha's teaching to kind of do that, to recognize that your meditation practice is developing to the point where there's a peaceful abiding there. And it's okay I would say, to look back on, well, this morning's meditation, that really was a very pleasant and peaceful abiding. There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe I should put it this way, there's nothing distracting in that. It's just a recognition that I'm doing what's correct. What would be as important is to recognize, well, in that meditation, I found myself grasping after establishing myself in a dimension of nothingness. It's okay if you did that, but recognize that that's just more eye making, or any of the other practices.
Yeah.
For many, many years, my first meditation practice was transcendental meditation, which is mantra based. And there's also some visualizations, deity worship, that is a kind of a subset of that I never put too much emphasis on. But even many years after I started doing right meditation as the Buddha taught, I'd find myself I'd be stuck in my mantra again. They told you never should tell your mantra to anybody. Mine was Harim, H-R-I-M. Don't tell anybody. And yeah, there's this big procedure that you go through, and you make a promise you'll never tell you. I found out later on, I was reading a book on Kriya Yoga, that these 7 Kriyas, they call them, syllables. And there's my secret syllable there in this book that everybody reads. Anyway, I'm meditating, Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. All of a sudden, without directing my thought, I realized that I'm back in that mind. And this is many, many years after I stopped transcendental meditation, but it was such a conditioned part of me. And even then, I might find myself, my teacher is a wonderful woman. I still remember her. In fact, I've been in touch. She died a few years ago, but I've been in touch with her husband. She also created a visual for you, and I would find myself stuck in that visualization. And it took me, I don't know how many years ago now that I abandoned those, but it was spontaneously there because it was such a conditioned way of looking at the world. So I don't know how I ended up there, but.
Well, it's a distraction.
Yeah, and it's important to recognize Well, that's the point. It's important to recognize that, yeah, that was a distraction for me in the past, and I would be dishonest if I said my meditation practice is so much more significant and meaningful now than it was 10 years ago. That's an evaluation, but it's not something I engage in during meditation at all.
Yeah, so this was really brilliant because it's kind of clicked in really well for me, because I'm thinking, well, the importance of this is really to have this this ability to break the chain of thought when needed to incorporate the Eightfold Path.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
that's all it is.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's
It's
all it
almost
is.
like weightlifting. It's like doing bicep curls to make yourself stronger. We're just doing bicep curls for the brain.
Yeah, and so yeah, what
So
you're
you can
describing,
inject some right view.
you understand.
Great, I like
You've always understand. Any adult knows what concentration means, but now you understand it at a much deeper level as it applies to the Buddha's Dhamma. This is what we're after. And again, it's enough to say, okay, let's go. The word jhana means concentration. So you could say, oh, just go and concentrate. But you can't, can you? Nobody could do that. I'm speculating, but I don't think any human being could just be told to go concentrate and actually do it. You need to understand how to do it, why to do it, and how to get there. And along the way, you need to be told, because of the mind's conditioning towards ignorance, you need to be told, you got to recognize it, notice it when it's there. And then if you notice it when it's there, it's equally important to notice when it's not there, when I'm not well concentrated. That's a Dhamma. That's a mind of a Dhamma practitioner that understands what it's doing, rather than engaging in a practice that is simply constant distraction, even though it might feel good, because it doesn't develop any level of concentration. And if there's no concentration, there's no Dhamma. So it's singularly important, like you just said too. It really is a great sutta and a great class. David, good to see you this morning.
Morning, Jen. I think one of the more important things you said was, and I certainly learned this on the retreat, properly instructed. Without that proper instruction, someone can look on your website and see awakening in one paragraph. And what more do you need? Well, you need.
I better get rid of that. Yeah.
Well, that's good though. You want to put it on a little postcard, but you do need to be properly instructed. And a lot of what these teachings are, this is what you will experience during your meditation, whether it's the hindrances or the 7 factors, or the jhanas, or I got caught up in the 4th foundation of mindfulness. It became very contemplative, and during the retreat, it's just what you're going to experience. So that's been very important to me, and I believe a good portion of the time I experience right meditation, because there is no good or bad meditation. For a while, Mary and I were like, how was your meditation? I'm like, it's meditation. So I thank you for the instruction.
Thank you. The whole Dhamma is remarkably simple, but our minds are so prone to distraction and protecting ignorance that it seems very complicated.
Because even the contemplative part, it's just a distraction.
It is.
I learned the list, now I'm going to contemplate on it. And I'm doing it during my meditation. I mean, it may be wholesome that I'm understanding it, but instead of just experiencing it, I'm contemplating on it.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see how whole schools of meditation turn into that.
Yep.
That, the hour-long meditations are just the 4th foundation, or eternal grounds. It's so easy to see how that slides into that.
Yep.
It's a practice.
Yeah, and it seems like it's useful when you're doing it, especially when again, it's the way the mind works. When we do something, when we put any effort in doing something, we now have a vested interest in continuing it, don't we? We don't like to figure we wasted time. Or if we're associated with people that are doing something in a certain way, it's nearly impossible to not follow the crowd. The Buddha was the preeminent radical thinker in human history. I won't say just during his time, because he recognized what the masses were doing. And even though he joined them to experience it, he realized that it was just, in a general way, further distraction. And so he left it. And again, that's the whole point of seclusion, is not just a visual of a root of a tree or an empty hut or our meditation room. It's seclusion from worldly events and being entangled in worldly events. And in that way, and only in that way, can we deepen our concentration and extricate ourselves from that whole process. And the teachings are so clear on that too. But again, you need to have the proper context. And you need to come on retreats once in a while. Had to put that in there.
I was just thinking, so that the big difference between meditation and prayer is that prayer is the contemplation, plus there's also very much of a wishing aspect.
Usually,
an
yes.
ascertainment or some kind of a thought or a goal or something you're praying for.
Yeah.
And I know Buddhism in some sects has evolved into a religion, but in this, the way to learn it, it's different, because we're not hoping or praying for something when we're meditating.
Yeah, the Buddha never saw himself as a savior. He didn't try to teach a salvific religion. He simply taught a way of living fully mindfully in this moment as life occurs, free of the distraction of self-identification and self-reference. It's remarkable in even that, I think, that he didn't try to fit it into a religious type of practice, because he recognized the cruelty in doing that, to yet another religious practice that leads people towards further confusion.
It's a goal. It becomes a goal. Like,
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels bland, but in a Tibetan approach, there's some pretty cool things. You get a robe. You go on a mountain. You get to meet the Dalai Lama. There's a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
Where in your private practice,
there's nothing.
You just get some wisdom that no one around you may understand, and you don't get that feedback.
I think, we were just talking to Lorna about this when you read the Jhana Sutta. After all this time, I really look at Siddhartha Gautama as a buddy of mine. Because I know him, and of course I don't know everything that he thought. But I think I do in some ways, because it just comes through in the suttas and how he teaches and why he teaches. And when you understand his own search, that I'll teach that in a few weeks, you realize why he came to these conclusions too. And it's just so remarkably brilliant. And also it's utterly simple. Even this, it's using the jhanas as an example. These are taught, if they're taught at all, and it's usually in Theravadan Buddhism that they'll even mention it, sometimes in Zen, but they're taught as these exalted meditative states that no one can ever really hope to achieve. Well, these are I didn't make any of these suttas up. I'm reading what the Buddha taught. They're just ordinary experiences during meditation, and it's important to recognize them. And when we recognize them, there's quite a few people that have had minor aha moments now during this series on jhanas, because we're realizing how simple concentration is, but that it takes concentration to become concentrated. It is remarkable.
When we talk about not having goals, there's another little subtle thing, because I think all of us in some way have a little sort of goal towards enlightenment.
Oh yeah.
And that's another thing I think you have to be careful about, right? Because then you go through life feeling enlightened which is another sort of a personality state you develop that's false.
Oh yeah, and again, when you follow the Dhamma the way the Buddha teaches, you can't get to that state of I making, that I am awakened, when you know you're not even close. So the goal of the Dhamma is to awaken, but there's checks within the practice when it's practiced correctly to not create I making out of it, to make it anything special, except this is what I do. And I do because I understand that a human being actually did this, not some godlike creature. A human being actually did this, and he left his Dhamma that's still here for me to incorporate. And then one of the most remarkable things is that we actually have a well-focused Sangha right here, that third jewel, that third refuge. It's rare in the world, like the Buddha said in the Anapanasati Sutta, just like it was during his time. A well-focused Sangha that just practices what the Buddha taught is rare in the world. But you can also see the reason for it, can't you? It's too easy to get distracted when you decide that it's okay to add something or accommodate the practice or embellish it in any way. The whole Dhamma is lost. It's not just a little transgression, because of the way that a mind rooted in ignorance will grasp after anything and create continued I making, including seeing these jhanas as something extraordinary and unachievable. I was always taught that, you have to meditate, especially in a Zen school, but even in Tibetan, that meditation is what you do. And in Zen, it's hours and hours and hours of meditation, and very, very intense meditation with the right posture. And I mean, you go into some of the meditation halls and people are just dripping sweat because they're so intense on it. With the understanding that if you meditate long enough, hard enough, eventually you'll free this inner Buddha nature. I read most of the suttas, and not one word does the Buddha say we're trying to find our inner Buddha nature. And isn't that, when you look at it, simply more I making?
Right. I was just thinking that.
Yeah. And I remember when I had that final realization, it never felt right to me that I was searching after this inner Buddha nature. And finally, the thought clarified that if I had an inner Buddha nature, how did it get so screwed up? And why am I chasing after it? Really? So it just doesn't add up. But again, that's just another non-physical imaginary realm. What's most important is to, as the Buddha teaches, to unite the mind and the body and have this deep, profound understanding of what's occurring right now. And in that way, every moment of our life is meaningful, but not special. Remarkable. What a great class. There's going to be 3 or 4 more talks on jhana, just coming at this from different directions. And then I'll conclude with the Arya-Pariyasana Sutta. I think that's it. Our Dhamma dinner is on the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. We are inviting many of the principals from the Galassos fire. The mayor is coming, and I'll invite the borough council and the first responders of fire companies and the police and the rescue squad. If everybody comes, we're going to have about 600 people at Love and Oven, but it'll be what it'll be. And if anybody can help me with some of the preparation, I would greatly appreciate it. And you could send me an email on that. One other announcement. Oh, we're putting together the outline for our teacher training, which is going to begin early next year. I'll have the outline on the website, and I'll just so you're aware of it, and I hope you'll all partake in it. All right, let's finish with metta, as we always do. So find your relaxed meditation posture, and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And take a moment to become mindful of the sensation of breathing in your body, your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, May all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class this morning. Peace.